Hey everyone, welcome back to Indoor Recess. I'm Braydon Holmyard and I'm hosting our mid-season Blue Jays check-in today, joined by Toronto Star baseball columnist Gregor Chisholm. How's it going, Gregor?
Doing great.
Good. So let's get into it. It's been quite the week for sports and baseball's no exception. So over the last 48 hours, we've seen leagues across North America take drastic action in protest of anti-Black racism and police brutality, specifically in the wake of the shooting of Jacob Blake. The Blue Jays were one of several teams last night who decided not to play, and you wrote about it in your column, which I suggest any baseball fan should read. But can you kind of explain how that decision for the Jays came about?
Yeah, it really honestly didn't have much to do with the Blue Jays. This was mostly a decision that came down to Jackie Bradley Jr. and his teammates with the Boston Red Sox. I mean, Charlie Montoyo told us yesterday that, he talked to his players early in the day. He wanted them to get together and hold a vote on whether or not they wanted to play that night's game. The players did that. They voted and they were going to play. It wasn't until later in the afternoon when they got word. It first came out that Bradley Jr. definitely was not going to play, and then it quickly came out afterwards that his teammates were going to support him. But, this was very much a Boston Red Sox decision, and it makes me wonder if, the situation might have been a little bit different if Anthony Alford was still with this team. I mean, Anthony Alford spent the vast majority of this season as the only African-American player on the Blue Jays. He was designated for assignment a week ago, picked up by Pittsburgh yesterday. But we saw early in the season when it came to the kneeling for the national anthem issue, at first he was the only Blue Jay player who was going to do it. Kevin Biggio and Vladimir Guerrero Jr. joined him. But that was really an initiative led by Alford. And at the time, the Jays talked at length about how much he was educating them on a lot of issues. And, we don't know what would have happened if Alford was here, but I certainly do wonder, if he had been around to have his voice heard in that meeting. My expectation is that they probably wouldn't have played based on the decision by the Blue Jays after talking to him.
So your column also touches on Commissioner Rob Manfred and baseball as a whole sending mixed signals on social justice. How does baseball's actions throughout this week on social justice kind of stack up to other leagues?
Yeah, I mean, the thing that was disappointing to me, and to be fair, the NBA and NHL postponing their games really was a player-led initiative, especially on the NBA side.
Right.
And so it didn't really come from the league itself. However, I think that baseball still should have taken that kind of leadership step and kind of provided a little bit more direction from the top, because to me, yesterday was a bit of a mess. I mean, you had teams holding votes all over the league about whether or not they were going to play. You would basically half the league deciding not to play, half the league deciding to play. To me, that just creates more of a fraction within the league. And I think what you're doing there is clubhouses like the Blue Jays, where there isn't an African-American voice in there, they might not feel quite the same way, but then they're getting asked a lot of questions. It's almost like they've done something wrong by deciding to play. And there's something unfortunate about that too. So I think that, that really should have come from the top on down. So, Major League Baseball, I touched on this in the column yesterday too. I mean, Jackie Robinson's final year in the major leagues, the percentage of African Americans in Major League Baseball was 6.7%. In 2016, 60 years later, it was the exact same. Now, it went up to 20% in the 1980s, and it has gone up higher, but it's really dipped back down. And to me, that's a bit of an issue. And there's diversity elsewhere. I mean, the number of Latinos has definitely gone up across Major League Baseball, but it really has come at the expense of diversity in other areas too. And so it would have been nice for me to see the league really take an initiative and stand by the players and take that out of their hands a little bit instead of putting them on the spot as much as they did yesterday.
Lots of good points there. And thanks for pointing out also that this was player-led action. You're right. It was not the league. So let's talk about the Blue Jays' first half. It's safe to say it's been a very strange first half for them, which kind of fits into a strange baseball season. Are you surprised with where they're sitting right now?
Only a little bit. I mean, at the start of the year, when we did this video at the start, we didn't know there was going to be an expanded playoffs. I think at the time I said
Right.
the Jays would make the playoffs. But if we knew at the time that there was going to be 8 teams making it in, I would have said that basically the Blue Jays are in that 9-10 spot with a shot to get in at number 8. I think the big surprise to me is that, the Los Angeles Angels on paper were supposed to be a really good contender this year, that team probably would have made my top 8 going into the year, and the Jays probably would have been number 9. So it's not overly surprising that they're in the number 8 spot, but it is a little bit. To me, that has more to do with the competition in the bottom half of the American League. I mean, there really is a pretty big discrepancy between the teams that are contending and the ones that aren't. I mean, even the ones that are close to the Jays right now, I don't think there's too many expectations that the Baltimore Orioles are going to stick through this for the next month. And then when you look at the teams below that, I mean, there's just not a lot of scary teams. Detroit Tigers, Kansas City Royals, it's really not that threatening. And that's why I've been saying for the last couple of weeks, that, despite the early season struggles by the Blue Jays, I mean, a playoff spot is theirs to lose. And really, we just have to make an adjustment on how we view playoff teams because, instead of the limited number that we saw before, I mean, basically the number is close to doubled. And so, the Jays might be looking like they have in the past at times, but, this season, that's still probably good enough to get into the postseason.
This team has found some interesting ways to win lately. They seem to often do things the hard way. What do they need to do to make sure they find some consistency here and really lock in on that playoff spot?
I mean, if this is going to be a postseason team, I mean, they need to mature a little bit in a hurry, especially defensively and on the bases. I mean, those are things that should be within their power. Because it's not just the physical errors. There's been far too many mental errors, and that's going to come with a young team. But, I mean, those games that we saw, especially in the first couple weeks of the season where those close ball games are really slipping away from them, I mean, it's good teams late in September and then obviously in October. I mean, you're just not going to be a winning ball club when you play like that. So they just need to tidy things up in a lot of ways. Obviously, the lineup needs to be more consistent from week to week, but this is what the Blue Jays lineup is. I mean, there's going to be weeks where we have that narrative where they're striking out double digits every game and only coming up with a few hits and not getting many runs. And then there's going to be other games when they explode for 10 runs. This is a streaky lineup. That's going to come and go. I don't see that changing, but at least the mental errors are ones that they should be able to clean up.
What do you make of some of the criticism that we've seen towards lineup and personnel decisions from Charlie Montoyo and his coaching staff?
Yeah, I mean, I think a lot of it's fair. I mean, I certainly was pretty critical of Montoyo in the early going, and I certainly stand by a lot of that criticism. I mean, there are some curious lineup decisions. There are some curious bullpen moves. The one thing I will say, and my view has changed a little bit from the start of the year. I mean, this team is treating their starting rotation very differently than it did before. There's just, that's a fact. And yeah. I mean, some of it has been a byproduct of injuries and guys filling in. But it's gone beyond that. I mean, this team hasn't had a starter recorded out in the 7th inning. There's been a few times where they easily could have done that. There's been times when Montoyo's taken guys out in the 5th because he didn't want them to go through the lineup a third time through the order. A lot of that has to come down to the bullpen. I mean, this is a team that's putting more confidence in its bullpen than it ever has before. And a lot of it's because of those swing guys like Anthony Kay, Ryan Barucki, Thomas Hatch. Those are the guys that they want to get into ball games a little bit earlier and pitch more innings than you're otherwise used to. So I look at some of those decisions a little bit differently than I did before. And I think Montoyo himself has settled into a bit more of a routine. I mean, we're not seeing Shun Yamaguchi, even though he's pitching better. We're not seeing him thrown out every time in the 10th inning when the Blue Jays go to extra innings. And we're not seeing, the Sam Gabilios pitch high leverage innings like they were earlier in the year. So I think it's a combination of us adjusting how we look at this team and also Montoyo himself making some adjustments on how he's managing his team.
So one more question before we touch on some of the recent acquisitions the Jays have made. How would you assess Guerrero Jr.'s first half? And is it at all concerning that he's yet to reach kind of those, or even really approach those astronomical expectations that he's had since becoming one of the top prospects in baseball?
Yeah, I mean, that's probably one of the things I get asked by Blue Jays fans more than anything else. And I mean, I certainly will concede that, the first year and a half of his career so far has been disappointing. And that's mostly because of the expectations you're talking about. I mean, to a certain extent, a lot of them might have been unrealistic in hindsight, but at the same time, you look across the league and you see guys like Fernando Tatis Jr., up those kind of video game like numbers that we kind of expected from Vladdy. So sure, it certainly is disappointing. There is a bit of concern there, especially when it comes to that launch angle issue, and really you'd like to see him get more balls in the air. And there are some issues with the mechanics. But look, I mean, the guy's still in his early 20s. He's still figuring it out. I mean, if this was almost anybody else in baseball, there wouldn't be nearly this level of concern. And I think we've seen him make some changes over the last few weeks. I still think he's going to be fine. I think those inconsistencies are going to continue throughout this year probably. But I still, this is not a guy I'm going to bet against. Let's just say that. I will concede that the expectations aren't quite there. I still fully expect Vladimir Guerrero to turn into a regular annual all-star, mostly because of his bat. I mean, the defense isn't going to be there, but this guy's going to slug for a long time, and I'm confident he's going to figure it out.
All right, so next time you get asked about it, you can just keep shooting off the link to this video. Okay, so they've been very active on the trade market, maybe the most active team in baseball. I haven't really seen much else happening. So first of all, what do you make of the Daniel Vogelbach trade?
I mean, I was kind of iffy, wishy-washy on it, I guess. I mean, it's fine. I think initially people were kind of treating that as almost like listing it as a trade deadline acquisition. And to me, it just kind of falls into I mean, he was designated for assignment the week before. I mean, to me, this is basically a waiver claim. I mean, this is just the Jays throw some cash at Seattle in order to basically bump their spot up on that waiver claim and get the guy. So to me, there can be some trial and error here. I don't love the fit. I mean, to me, he's Rowdy Tellez 2.0. I mean, he's going to hit some homers for you. There's no doubt about that. He's also potentially going to hit below 200 for you, and he's going to strike out a lot. So, I mean, if this was a team that really needed that kind of power bat, I would see it a little bit more. That's not the Jays' weakness right now. I mean, they need guys who are going to get on base. The one thing he does do is take some pitches, which a lot of Jays don't do. So there is something there, but it depends on how they use him. I mean, if this is just a situation where they're looking for power off the bat as kind of a late game pinch hitter, or just a guy to split time with Tellez and kind of push him a little bit, or even open up the possibility that Tellez could be moved in a separate deal, I would get all of that. What I don't get is, this recent talk of potentially moving Vladimir Guerrero, taking some ground balls back at third base. I mean, moving Guerrero in an emergency type situation might make sense. Vogelbach's not that guy to me. I'm not moving Guerrero to get his bat in the lineup, even though the Jays have had their issues at third base this year.
So you've mentioned already today about the pitching injuries and the pitchers not going deep into games. You wrote about how they need a starter. They did that with Taijuan Walker. Can he give this team's playoff chances a boost? Like, is he what they needed?
Yeah, I think he is. I mean, it's not a huge, big name that would bring back memories of like a 2015 deadline or something like that. I think people, really shouldn't have those expectations for this deadline. I mean, I think it's encouraging for Blue Jays fans to see the Blue Jays actually invest, more resources into the team they have right now and actually make a bit of a run for it. It's been 4 years since we've seen that around here, so I think that's long overdue. And look, I think Walker was one of the better rentals available. I mean, in order to get this, I think this Jays team would love to get guys with multiple years of control, but they're not after the high-priced guys with multiple years of control. I mean, you're talking about guys who would probably be still in their arbitration years, and maybe something like that happens, but I still think that's a more realistic possibility for the offseason. So I think if you're the Jays, you should be doing everything you can to explore those guys on expiring contracts. And Walker was one of the better guys available. And I think what this does, the biggest benefit in my mind, we touched on the bullpen earlier, what this does is it allows you to preserve some more of that, middle inning depth that the Jays have really been prioritizing. I mean, I've been really wanting to see guys like Kay and Hatch enter the starting rotation to see what they can do. But at the same time, I understand the perspective of Toronto right now, where it's bringing in a veteran guy who's done it before, someone that they've liked for a while. I mean, he's not a frontline starter. He's more of a, mid to back rotation type guy, but he's got some upside. And so you bring him in here, you see what he can do. And then at the same time, they still have one spot to fill in the rotation that probably goes to a guy like Kay. But then that still leaves you, with Hatch and Merriweather and Barucki, guys that you can use middle innings before you get to your late inning guys.
So in an ideal scenario, what's one other move the Jays should make before the deadline?
I would, if I'm the Jays and I'm really seriously considering going for it, I mean, to me, it's the lineup. This team could use another big bat. There's no doubt about it. A guy kind of like Vogelbach, but someone who has more talent and can be in there on an everyday basis. I mean, that to me is where you could really upgrade this team. And, whether that comes in the outfield where you could put him in right field and DH Teoscar Hernandez, whether that's a scenario where you pick up a designated hitter or a first baseman to split duties with Vladimir Guerrero bouncing back and forth between the two and providing an upgrade over Rowdy Tellez. I mean, to me, that's what they really need, someone who can slot into the middle of their order. I mean, again, I kind of think that that's probably more realistic for the offseason too. I mean, my expectation for this team, and I could be wrong, I could be surprised, but I think they're going to do some minor tinkering more than anything. I mean, I think you're going to maybe see another arm for the bullpen, and I think you're going to see the bench beefed up a little bit. To provide a little bit more options off that, kind of like a Vogelbach type deal. But to me, a middle of the order bat, some guy who can hit behind Vladimir Guerrero, in front of Vladimir Guerrero, whatever you want to do to beef up the middle of the order.
All right, cool. Benching up the beef. That's a good way to leave this episode.
Benching up the beef.
So we'll definitely check in with you again as the playoff race heats up. You guys can follow Gregor on Twitter at Gregor Chisholm and read his work at thestar.com/Blue Jays. Gregor, we have meaningful baseball games in September again, so it should be a fun few weeks. Thank you for doing this.
No problem. Anytime.